So welcome everybody to the latest Brain or Shine webinar with myself, Jules. With myself, Mark, and Jules. That's what brain injury does to you, doesn't it? And our wonderful, lovely special guest, Sian, that we're going to introduce in a moment. But for those of you that are joining us for the however many times you've joined us in the past, rejoining us again, welcome back, and it's lovely to see you all online. And we've got a few little hellos in the chat already. So hello, Tim, Louise, and Amanda so far. Also, if you're joining us the first time, these webinars are scheduled to last around about 30 minutes. We can't see you guys. All we can see is just your names in the chat. So everything you put on there is just between us. If you want to share anything, if you just want to sit back and listen and put your feet up or anything like that, don't worry, because we can't see you sitting there listening with your feet up. You're not on camera or anything like that. Please don't worry. A few people do ask us that. And also, if you're watching back on this as well, then please do enjoy. Obviously, you can't interact with the chat if you're watching it back, but you can drop us a line and we'll tell you how to do that at the end. And I think I've covered all those things that they call housekeeping.
You've done really well.
Yeah.
I didn't get a word in edgeways, which is fairly normal. So, yeah, welcome everybody.
So today we have a wonderful special guest. Hi, Sian, welcome.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, now, obviously I'm going to let Sian introduce herself properly in a moment, but just to let you know, we're absolutely delighted to partner up with Slater Gordon, who are a major law firm in the UK. And the reason why we got in touch with them was because we met them at the Headway Awards a couple of years ago, and they were sponsoring the award that I won very proudly. And we just thought we'd reach out and talk to them and see if there was any sort of partnerships or if they could promote anything that we were doing since we set Brain or Shine up. And they kindly came on board and said they'll sponsor and support our webinars. So it's only fair that we get them along to tell us a little bit of advice from the outside as well, not just from Mark and Jules, but from legal points of views, from support points of views and everything like that as well. And Sian's going to talk a little bit about legal procedures and claims and that today, but please don't think, well, I don't need to make a claim, I'm going to switch off now, because this is just really, really useful stuff. And we've talked quite in depth about this in the build up to it. So we just wanted to get Sian's expertise on about support, and also just to let you know, because you come across people in the brain injury community that may need these services. So is there anything else you want to add?
No, you're doing a fantastic job.
Oh, really good
I'm
job.
really impressed. Well done. It's going to have a lay down afterwards.
I know lay down now.
But yes, no, that's wonderful. And yeah, very warm welcome to Sian. Thank you so much for doing this.
No,
so
thank you so much for having me.
Hand over to you and let you
Fabulous.
tell us all about.
Sorry, I should have probably asked this before. But I press present and then will it allow me to click the slides, or are you clicking the slides? Or
you know what? We've absolutely no idea. But if you can't do that thing the politicians do. Next slide, please, and we'll press a button.
We'll do that.
Great. Okay. So as Mark and Jules have already said, I'm Sian Thomas and I'm a senior lawyer at Slater Gordon. I'm based in Liverpool in the UK and I lead the serious injury team there. So I specialise in serious injury claims for compensation that arise following injury predominantly in road traffic collision claims, but I also deal with other types of claims that arise from accidents at work as well, and accidents in a public place. And Slater Gordon are a consumer law firm, so they act for individuals. And they provide legal services in a variety of different areas. So court of protection, employment law issues, medical negligence, wills, trust and probate, and family, just to kind of name a few kind of key ones there. So yeah, I'll probably go on to the first slide if that's okay. Thank you. So I thought it would be useful to kind of cover the basic principles of a personal injury case and also the process that they go through, just so that there's kind of a bit of an understanding there in terms of, you know, timeframes and that kind of thing. And then also I'll talk about the lesser known benefits of a claim and things that can help along the way. So first and foremost, in a personal injury case, we would need somebody to blame. So we would need to establish that it was somebody's fault or their inaction or failure to act brought about this injury. So that might be an individual. So for example, a car driver. It might be a company. So perhaps an employee of a company that's maybe injured somebody at work. It might be a local authority. So if there was a hazard on the highway or a defect on the highway, cyclist, hitting a pothole in the road, that would be the local authority remit. And then typically would look for the insurance of those particular individuals and company, and they would ultimately be the paymaster or the check signing person, if you like, at the end of the claim. Sometimes people don't have insurance when driving a car, which is obviously illegal, but it sometimes happens. And in those scenarios, there is a body called the Motor Insurers Bureau, or the MIB for short, and they compensate victims of untraced and uninsured drivers. And there's also a Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority body as well, and they compensate victims of violent acts and crimes. So there is, an opportunity to kind of pursue a compensation claim there as well. And then just on the bottom of that slide is just a few bits of information that we would generally need at the start to get the ball rolling and pursue the claim. So then if you could move to the next slide. So time limit. Firstly, in the UK, the time limit to bring a personal injury claim is typically 3 years from the date of an accident, or the date that a person ought to have known that they were injured. The second part of that is a bit complicated, and it tends to be more so applicable in medical negligence claims, where you might not know straight away that somebody's negligence or a medical professional's negligence has resulted in an injury. So it kind of covers those scenarios. There are exceptions. So the exceptions are children, and that time frame doesn't run until they reach their 18th birthday. And then in addition to that is people who lack mental capacity to litigate. The time frame doesn't apply during the period in which they are said to have lacked mental capacity. So there are a few kind of exceptions to that rule. And then I'll run through kind of in a whistle-stop tour, keep it quite brief because I don't want to embark on a law lecture with you all. But essentially the kind of slide that's set out there just goes through the various points, and those kind of different headings take various lengths of time depending upon each individual case. So it's not, one size fits all, and it very much just depends on the circumstances. So we would typically carry out, obviously, the initial investigations that I touched on before, find out who's responsible, what happened, and make, obviously, contact with the defendant, the insurers, that kind of thing. And then at the very, very outset, we would always consider rehabilitation. And that's essentially, there are rules that govern, obviously, the claims process, and one of the rules and guidelines that are put in place is the Rehabilitation Code, and it requires parties in litigation to think about rehabilitation straight away and keep it at the forefront. And there are timeframes that are set for when you need to respond. And you really do need to consider it at the very start. So when the letter of claim is sent to initiate the claim, you think about it then, and you ask for the funding. And that might either be via the Rehabilitation Code, which is a kind of collaborative working framework, or you might ask for an interim payment and fund it yourself through the claim. So ask for kind of advance funding to kind of put in place the rehabilitation. Then we would kind of move through liability inquiries if we needed to really establish what did happen and it's really unclear. We might need police reports, we might need accident reconstruction reports. It as I say, it is very case specific, and sometimes not very much information is known at all at the start, and the investigations are quite in-depth investigations are needed to know ultimately what happened. And then we would move on to to ultimately trying to place a valuation, if you like, on the award of compensation. And to do that, we would get expert reports from medico-legal experts. So they are different to the treating experts that you'll have seen, in the aftermath of an accident. And they are there to produce a report on the injury primarily that was suffered, the effect of the injury, the impact on work, on life, on hobbies, and then as far as they can, because ultimately they don't have a crystal ball, but as far as they can, based on their medical expertise, what is the future going to hold? So will it, will the injury recover? Hopefully so. If it won't, then, what will the symptoms be longer term? Or will they recover at some point in the future? If so, when? Or will there be residual symptoms? And if so, what? And how will that impact on somebody? So the reports are generally quite in depth, and we might need several if, if the injuries warrant it, and depending on the nature of the injuries as well. If there's multiple, orthopedic, brain injury, you would need different experts to deal with the different aspects. And then once we'd collated all of the financial losses, so out of pocket expenses, that might be loss of earnings, treatment, travel expenses, etc., we would look at those both past and then with expert support future as well. So are there future care needs? Are there a need for adapted, or is there a need for adapted accommodation? All of those things would be factored in to the financial settlement, and then we would move to settlement once we had all of those kind of ducks in a row, if you like, and then look at advice on investment and trusts as well, depending upon obviously the nature of the settlement and the award. So then move on to the next slide, please. So this was really just to highlight certainly what I come across in my work is just making sure that the support network around the person that's been injured is joined up and collaborative, because I think it works wonders, because ultimately if everybody is working to the same aim and forming a collaborative working relationship supporting the client, then the client can only benefit from that. And not everybody's going to be involved at the very outset of of an accident or an injury having just occurred. But if and when people kind of withdraw from this circle, the police investigation completes, so they withdraw from it, the medical professionals withdraw on discharge, then if you've got the other parts of the circle kind of in place, then they can move in and provide the additional support and kind of help the injured person and the family move through the process of life after injury and supporting them through that. So I just thought it was kind of important to highlight that. And then on the next slide, I'll move to the kind of lesser known benefits of a claim, if you like, and the reasons why you might consider pursuing a claim. Because whilst the overall aim is obviously to secure a financial award, that's the point of of bringing a claim is to get that sum of money. We will build the case in the background, but there are lots of things that we can do during the claim that will support the person along that journey. Cases can take years because you need so much medical evidence, and particularly in brain injury cases and serious injury cases, and you wouldn't really want the person to just be sat there waiting for this financial settlement at the very outcome, at the very years and years down the line. So during the course of the claim, we would always aim to try and put some of these in place and support the person as best we can, to ultimately reconstruct and rebuild the life as they move through. So obviously the claim would provide the future financial security, which is at the top of the spider diagram. So that would encompass kind of the future loss of earnings, the adapted accommodation, support worker input, future care needs, things like that. So we would obviously obtain the compensation award to kind of provide that future financial security, because people can just be completely railroaded after an accident. Your life plan is not the same anymore, and then trying to piece all that back together and having financial pressures on top. So ultimately the claim will provide that security. We would look at dealing with other legal issues that might arise, so perhaps discharge from employment. On ill health grounds, we've got an employment team that can help provide advice there. We would look to signpost to charities, so during the course of a claim, meet statutory services and get in touch with local headway groups, that type of thing. Interim payments, which I touched on before. So obviously bills still need to be paid, even if you're not at work. And so, we can ask for advance funding to obviously relieve the financial pressure that people will be feeling. And then obviously treatment and rehabilitation, which I touched on before, that will kind of run alongside the whole, the whole claim usually, and adapt to the needs and have goals and things like that people are trying to meet. Media team, which is probably something you wouldn't necessarily think of, but in high profile cases, obviously the media can be getting in touch, and we do have a media team that can field inquiries and put out messages if that's what somebody wants to do, or completely keep them at bay and stop them contacting anybody. And then inquiry and inquest representation. So if it's part of a major inquiry, so the Manchester Arena inquiry, for example, we were involved in that. The people that were involved and were affected by it, we obviously represented their kind of interests as they were moving through that process, and also attending inquests in fatal injury cases as well. We do obviously offer that support as well. So then on the next slide, I was just going to put all of that kind of into a real life scenario. So I was acting for a client recently, a few years ago, sorry now, and it was a pedestrian who was crossing a road and they were involved in a collision with a car. There was issues with contributory negligence, which is a legal term, and it essentially means an argument that perhaps the pedestrian contributed in some way to the accident occurring, which often doesn't go down very well because obviously they've been run over by a car. But it was, in this particular case, there was CCTV evidence that the person had ran across the road, and that when they did accident reconstruction, the vehicle would have been visible if the road had been checked fully, if you like, before they crossed the road. So there was some argument that, had they checked and not run across the road, that perhaps the accident would have been avoided. So in circumstances like that, the compensation award tends to be reduced by a percentage. And in this particular case, it was 25%, which is fairly typical. But it can be as high as kind of a third, or, even up to 50% in some cases. He suffered a severe traumatic brain injury and serious orthopedic injury, spent over a year in hospital and in a rehabilitation centre. His past, they had a bit of a challenging past and limited work history, but at the time there was evidence that they were turning their life around, had secured a trade apprenticeship, so we secured witness evidence to support that and support a future loss of earnings claim on the basis of obviously the evidence that we had. We implemented a comprehensive package of rehabilitation. We had a support worker in place, a case manager that was overseeing it all, various other therapies, so neuropsychology, essentially just a full package of everything that he needed. He needed single story accommodation because of his orthopedic injury, so we secured that with additional funding for obviously increased rental payments of the post-injury accommodation needs versus pre-accident. And we signposted to local charities as well, so they went to a local Headway group a couple of times a week, so the case manager helped in securing that placement as well, because it can be quite difficult to get places, I think, sometimes. But as I say, they managed to secure it there. And yes, they lacked capacity, unfortunately, to give instructions to me. So a friend helped them, and they provided instructions on their behalf. And we also implemented a deputy as well. So they needed a professional deputy to manage, or it's essentially a professional solicitor that manages the financial award for them, because they're deemed not to have capacity to do that themselves. There are obviously fees associated with that, but we claim all of those fees as well. So that was incorporated in the settlement, and then it ultimately settled for quite a substantial 7-figure settlement at the end. So we were able to obviously provide for his future needs and future requirements. So and I think the next slide was just a kind of summary of the points, really, that legal advice is important for a number of different reasons. So obviously, pursuing a hopefully successful claim, but there are a lot of things that you can get out of it along the way. And I've had cases where it wasn't successful, but we were able to get some rehabilitation funding in the meantime whilst it was investigated, so there were benefits there. And signposting and contacting at the earliest opportunity just helps us to get things in place as quickly as possible. And hopefully that shows that there's a lot more that can be achieved that's more than just the financial aspect. That's me.
Thank you so much. Thank
Sorry,
you.
trying to cram a lot of information in a short space of time. Hopefully I didn't overrun too much.
No, that was fantastic.
It was fantastic.
It's really, really, really informative, and you know, you don't realise just how much goes on behind the scenes. Yeah, it's incredible. It's really, really interesting. Really good.
Yeah, definitely. And I have the brain injury, and I understood all of that. So there you go. That's testament to you explaining it.
Good.
What we'll do at this point as well is I had a few questions in advance, and I think we've covered quite a lot of them already. But people have submitted to us through various brain injury forums. If any of our listeners who are live with us at the moment have any questions, pop them in the chat. That's really, really useful. If you're listening back on this, because I know quite a lot of our listeners do listen afterwards as well, then just drop us a line, because we'll give you the contact details and we can get the answers from Sian and her team as well.
Absolutely.
But one of them that we got here as well is I want to start with the light-hearted one. Person asked us, what's the most random claim you've ever had?
Oh, the most random claim. I think it often involves animals. So we get quite a few inquiries with that involve animals having caused an accident. So it was really sad, actually. I had a case where a dog ran out into the road, and it was the dog that had caused the accident, and it caused the client to come off their motorbike. And yeah, as I say, it's still a matter of tracking down the owner of the dog and whether the dog was insured. Fortunately, in this case, for the client, the dog was insured, and they had public liability insurance, so we were able to bring a successful claim, because the motorcycle rider was quite significantly injured.
Wow.
So yeah, that's probably the most random claims that we get tend to be those types of claims.
Gosh.
Yeah,
But it's really sad. I know, because the dog was quite badly hurt as well. And
I'm sure the dog was hurt as well. Somebody who's joined us asked a question. Said, why do I have to have the same assessment for my solicitor and the defence solicitor when they work for the court?
So I presume that this is in relation to medical expert examinations. So typically, the reason that you have to have two, it tends to only be in higher value claims or more serious injury claims. And whilst the expert's duties are to the court and they are independent, it's because they might have different ranges of opinion. So things are not always black and white, and some medical professionals might have a more optimistic view of the recovery of an injury versus perhaps another doctor who might have a bit more of a pessimistic view. So there might be, fairly nuanced differences in their opinions, but it can make a difference in terms of the value of a claim. So, in a brain injury case, for example, it could be the difference between needing, an awake carer or a sleeping carer, and the difference in cost in those two variances is quite significant. So, as I say, they usually do that to try and test the evidence and see if there's an alternative opinion. Hopefully that answers that question.
I hope that answers it, Amanda. And if you have any more follow-up questions to that, then just pop them in the chat as well.
Yeah, hopefully that addresses it.
Yeah. We had quite a few questions about timeframes, which you answered, which was really good. There was also somebody put one here which said, I had a stroke before an accident and then I fell off a step ladder at work and suffered a head trauma. So can I still claim? We're not sure whether the claim's going against the falling off the step ladder or whether it's the actual claim is because it happened in the workplace and they suffered a head trauma. So
yeah,
they already had head injuries.
Yeah, there's probably quite a few different points there, as you say. But yeah, the short answer is yes. So just because you have a prior medical history doesn't preclude you from bringing a claim. The way that you address that is that you would look at what the pre-accident kind of baseline functioning was. So in terms of the stroke that had occurred, were there any ongoing or persistent cognitive issues or physical issues that arose following that, and then look at the post post-accident injury position, and you would get expert evidence, so that you would imagine that the stroke will have been quite heavily documented in medical records. So we would request all the medical records, see what the difference is effectively, and the claim would be for the difference between the two. So you obviously wouldn't be able to claim for the prior stroke if that wasn't related to anything, and that was just one of those things. But then you would be able to claim obviously for the difference between the the position you were in as at the time that the accident occurred versus the position that you're in now, and if that's caused much more significant impact on your life. So obviously I would presume that from that he was working at the time, so from that, if it's affected ability to work, then the claim would encompass that as well.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you.
Yeah,
I think that's good, because I think most of the other ones are covered really. And one thing that's really stood out to me, and we've talked about the theme of today, is obviously finding out what you do, but also support and where you can go.
Yeah.
And you really headway quite a bit. And we're really delighted because we've seen the name Concetta's popped up on there. And hi, Concetta, she's one of our favourite people we've ever worked with at Headway. So it's lovely to see her on here. But you obviously mentioned you've referred people to Headway quite a lot.
Yeah. And obviously not just Headway, there's other charities and various support agencies that you would signpost to and support the person in any way that you can. Absolutely, it's key.
Yeah, and we had something else here and we're just trying to find it. You got it? Jules has got this one.
No, we were just discussing before we came on here that getting the right support is vital, whatever it is that you're trying to do. And obviously initially that's going to be something like physical support, which could be occupational or speech therapy, all sorts of things like that.
Absolutely.
Your support, you're just saying you can cover all of that as well and help towards that, which is brilliant.
So the case manager would generally have an OT or a nursing background. They would generally have the knowledge to understand the client's needs and goals and how they might get there with the aid of therapy, and then put in place or make recommendations for whatever therapy is needed, and that's the funding that you would then request. So it can be challenging in cases where liability is denied or hotly contested, because they might be less willing to kind of fund rehabilitation, albeit it shouldn't be a barrier in some cases. But as I say, that's where the kind of agencies and charities would come into their own really, to kind of access as much of the statutory support as we're able.
That's what I was going to say to anybody that there is a lot of charities worldwide out there and support groups, and I do appreciate that sometimes it's really difficult if you have the brain injury to be able to find them, because we come across them. But if you are struggling to try and get your family or friends to help you, and also if you can get a family or friend to come along to a session with you because you found that.
Without a doubt. Jules being involved in the process was massive, because I didn't feel like I just owned the problem then. It was something that was helping both of us. And
that's so key as well, and that is something that we also look at, is supporting the family as well with and partners and wives and things, husbands, with psychological treatment to come to terms with the effects.
Our last sort of question for you really is, how do people get in touch with you?
Well, I believe that you have
help or whatever.
I believe that you have Dominic Smith's details, and I think they're on the flyer. So by all means, get in touch with him, and he would be more than happy to kind of field it through. Or my details are on the website as well, so on Slater and Gordon. So by all means, just if you pop my name and Slater and Gordon into a search engine, it usually comes up with my mugshot on the website. So by all means, access me that way, and it'll have my direct dial on. So yes,
brilliant.
Well, for anybody who's out there listening, these guys are all over social media as well. And the thing I really like about your social media is that it's friendly, it's user friendly, it's easy to contact you guys, and also see what you're doing, which is just beyond injury claims as well. There's so much support, and we've followed it for quite some time, so that's really useful. But do get in touch with us. If you're struggling, just get in
Absolutely.
touch with Brain or Shine as well, and we'll give the details.
Yeah.
On that note, we are on brainOrShine.com. That's our website. Some of you guys will know it, some of you won't, but go to that, and that links you to absolutely everything that we do. So there's a private peer-to-peer support group. We also have Instagram and YouTube channels. We have podcasts, webinars, and what's the other one I've missed out? Blogs as well. So you can take in information whichever way you choose. And we always say pick the ones that work best for you. But the best thing you can do is tell other people about Brain or Shine, and obviously Slater and Gordon as well, because the more people can reach out and touch, the better job that we know we're doing, and the more people that interact, that supports me and Jules as well. So it works both ways. And I think that's everything. Have I missed anything out?
No,
I've done a good job today.
You've done a really good job.
Wow.
Thank you so much for having me. Really,
it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much. It's been so informative.
It has been a pleasure. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us. We'll let you all log off now. I think you stay on here afterwards, Sian, so we'll just say thank you in a
no worries.
Thanks
so much.
We look forward to seeing all of our listeners and watchers very soon. Thank you. Have a lovely evening.
Thanks.